All right. Okay, quickly, housekeeping. Final part is Aaron and Kyle, one of you will send, or Kyle most likely will send a link. We have a partnership with Power. They're an LOI alumni company. They're actually in our Boost program right now. With our partnership with them, you get access to an intern for 300 hours this summer for free if you come through LOI. So there's normally like a program fee, there's only a bunch of other things. You get 300 hours of an intern that like covered through their program. Power has a whole program to help international students get Canadian experience. And so if you haven't already, I highly recommend signing up for it. It is literally going to cost you $0. Even the program registration fee is waived if you're an LOI, like alumni company. And so I think we got to have the final list in by Monday. So we'll get the list. We'll post it in Slack as well in the group, and we'll also at Kyle, if you can find the landing page and share it, or Aaron, and just share it in the chat. Just highly recommend to sign up for that if you haven't already. Quick reminder on founder huddle expectations is that if you're not going to be attending, we understand, but your accountability is to your group. So please let your group and the LOI team know. So in your private Slack channel, make sure if you're not going to attend, you let people know, because if you're not attending and not letting us know, and it happens on a regular occurrence, we will ask you to either A, leave the huddle, or B, potentially leave the program and just reapply for the next cohort if you can't engage with all of the elements. So just a reminder that is the expectations for the founder huddles. And then for those of you should have received a message from Simran about setting up your Spontively account. This is a new platform that we're just launching, but it is going to be like our alumni database. So it's your chance to connect with all of the founders across Canada that are in our programming, understand what their skill sets are, all of the recordings of all of our sessions. So if you want to see some of the recordings of the booth sessions that we do, or some of the previous cohorts, it's all in there. And so make sure you set up your Spontively account. On to our next one, our time today. We're going to start with what's the big idea? Why do we talk about conscious leadership? Why is this a value for LOI? Why is it a session? How does entrepreneurship and impact combine? What does this mean for you as a youth entrepreneur? Then we're going to actually talk about some specifics so that I can give you some language and some tools to be able to look at social enterprise and impact and what that is, and have conversations about it so that you can go into these situations and opportunities with a bit of a framework for what it looks like. And then we're going to do some closing. And so to start, for those of you who remember, you can go into your annotate section, and using a stamp, where do you rank impact as a priority for your business? 10 being, it is the main reason you became an entrepreneur. 1 being, I do not care. I am here to make bank. And for those of you who want it, where it says Rob Iron or Info at LOI is sharing their screen, it is where there's a button that says setting, or does it say options, Kyle? What does it say?
It says view options for me.
Yeah, view options, annotate, stamp. You can make a stamp.
Yeah, I got caught on the little annotate thing. I couldn't click away from it. So yeah, it's right beside the little green box at the top, view options. It'll drop down and say annotate. You can click on that.
So Erin says it's a 1 for her. That's why she's down there. No, just kidding, Erin. It's fine. I can see your face. Hard to operate when you're in a auto stop. This is just, this is kind of what I've expected, as maybe somebody was going to pick a 3. I don't know. I was going to ask them maybe. I think a lot of you, one of the things that's amazing about youth entrepreneurship is that normally you're very problem driven. It's you experience something, you see something, you want to solve a problem or a pain point for somebody, and that's really what drives it. You see that a lot more in youth entrepreneurship than you do with people who enter entrepreneurship later in their life. And so this just gives you an idea of this is the cohort, this is a value for LOI. People who we don't really necessarily fit this value aren't in the program, because this is really what we think entrepreneurship is about, and why LOI exists. So just kind of orientating everybody with where we're at. Normally these go away after I click away, but okay, there we go. So what's the big idea? So as I mentioned at the start of this, wait till it changes. This is more or less my background. I was involved with an organization called Engineers Without Borders when I was in university. And through that, got to go work for a social enterprise in Zambia for 4 months called Biocarbon Partners. That's kind of like middle on the left side there. Was working to find ways to reduce or like find alternatives to deforestation in Zambia through an enterprise model. I then got involved with a B Corp certified called Do It Green in Calgary. I've been involved in more or less 4 or 5 different organizations that are very impact focused, a charity, a nonprofit, a B Corp, as a consultant for a while. My most recent one before LOI is I started a mobile grocery store. So that's top right. Mainly what we did was use trucks and had this modular model, but we did get a bus and turn it into a grocery store. And I have more pictures on this later in the session. But basically the last 10 years of my life, I have spent exploring this impact, this space between impact and business, and this kind of like what we're going to call like the emerging 4th sector later. And that's why I am running this session. And it's also aligned with LOI and why I took the job and why I think LOI is so great. So we're going to start by talking about some recent Patagonia news that came out last year. For those of you who aren't familiar, this is Yvon Chouinard. He is the founder and he was the sole owner. They was like the largest privately owned apparel company in the world up until last year. Was Patagonia. And I think all of you are very familiar with Patagonia and not just their product, but also their values and their beliefs and what they strive for and some of the reputation that they have. 2 excellent books if you're looking for good reads about this. Yvon has written 2 of them. One's called Let My People Go Surfing, and the other one's called The Responsible Company. And a big part of the reason I think I got into entrepreneurship were those books and Yvon's approach. And so in that news, so the news was, by the way, that they gave away 100% of the company to a nonprofit, and they're going to use 100% of their profits going forward to fight climate change, which is like hundreds of millions of dollars a year. They gave away the entire company that he owned privately to a nonprofit. And so instead of going public, he said, we're going purpose. And I touch more on this later. So just kind of remember that one. But before we dive too far into things, the Patagonia news was also a great example of another key lesson that you're going to learn along the way as entrepreneurship. And so a little bit of bonus content for everybody is, as this news came out, which I think is a fundamental thing where if you know Patagonia and Yvon Chouinard and everything that they're doing, they're really focused on the long-term sustainability of the planet and the work, and it's very much aligned with who they are. But with anything, people are going to have negative opinions of it. So there was so much about how they're dodging taxes and this, that, and the other thing. This is like more pictures that inside of that bus that we built, and we got a bunch of coverage for it, and like people like went crazy on comments, like most of it good, but a lot of people were like, "This is so dumb! Like why? Like it's wild. It doesn't matter what you do. People are going to have a negative or critical opinion. We call them armchair captains. They're just going to sit at home and criticize. So this is a good just note to take away from this, is that 10% of people will hate what you do no matter what. It happens in every industry, in every business. Doesn't matter how good what you're doing is, and they're always going to dislike it no matter what. So focus on the 90%, not the 10. It'll happen to you, I promise, at some point. And the main lesson there is that the problem with haters is they're going to hate, and you just got to ignore them. So side tangent back to Yvon Chouinard. And this is what I was talking about earlier. Like, even public companies with good intentions are under too much pressure to create short-term gain at the expense of long-term vitality and responsibility. And that short-term gain comes from quarter-over-quarter profits to increase shareholder value and return. And they legally have to do that. And so we're gonna take a minute here to go back to this initial prompt and say, okay, how can business and impact work together? Businesses be equitable and impactful, and how? So we're gonna do a quick breakout. I'm gonna stop sharing. So we're gonna break out into groups of like 3 or 4 and just take a minute to just kind of share your thoughts on that. So. Okay, we'll come back in about 5 minutes. I'll also put that in the chat.
What was the prompt again before I jump?
How can business impact work together?
Business and impact. Okay, where's my breakout room? Okay, see you in a sec.
All right. Which one should I join?
Yeah, I can hang out here.
All right, cool. Aaron's in that one. Just trying to find one that doesn't. Oh, there's one with one of those AI bots. I'll join that one. Paige and Spencer, cool.
Donation program or give back program. Thank you for ever turn that back on. That's kind of what we're familiar with, but when you're the entrepreneur, when you're the founder, you have a lot more responsibility because there's a lot more that goes on at a business than just those external pieces, right? There's customer engagement, HR practices, business and venture culture, suppliers, business model, team level, individual. All these elements are chances for you as an individual, as a leader, to really put, impact or demonstrate like what we call as conscious leadership. And so it's much more than just a give back program. It's much more than just a donation or whatever it may be. So just something to keep in mind, that you as a founder are responsible for most of this, and are going to have to make decisions over time for how this shows up for you and your business. And so why is like social impact and entrepreneurship so connected? In my mind, it's because they're inevitably like linked, right? I think, like we mentioned with the tips the other day, like a business at its core is just two things. Somebody has a pain point or a problem, and you have the best solution out there to solve it. And so entrepreneurship, the version of entrepreneurship that I really like am inspired by and passionate about, is about making the world a better place, solving problems, doing things better than we did before. And even though there's like other narratives about entrepreneurship that I'll talk about in a second, I think this is a really powerful one. I think that like most of the entrepreneurs here are really driven by, and is one of the main reasons that I'm here at the League of Innovators and doing this. And so we've seen it over time, how entrepreneurship and like impact are so like intrinsically tied together. So for those who don't know, this is Muhammad Yunus. He started the Grameen Bank, which gave out microloans. It's a for-profit entity, but it radically shifted a large part of the world and how we looked at creating sustainable impact over long periods of time, right? For those of you, a lot of you are familiar with Tom's, right? Tom's, like, they were kind of the biggest company to kind of have a really big brand around like buy one, give one, and everybody loved it. And it really showed like, they became a massively profitable and giant company and were really successful, while still having that part. And, for those of you who have a background maybe in international development, there are disagreements around the impact that they were having, but from an entrepreneurship perspective, that's really what set them apart. It wasn't their product, it was their give back program. That's why they exploded the way that they did. When Tom's was kind of like at its peak. So that's Blake. And they've actually done some good work since. So, right. And so like they made it famous, but now they're actually realizing that's not maybe the greatest impact model. Some of you might have also heard of Dan Price, who in 2016 set the minimum wage at their company at $70,000. Since then, like profits soared. Their retention rate is like through the roof. They get thousands of applications for every job that they post, right? And that's made huge impacts on their business. So there's this intrinsic piece between like that obviously has a huge impact on the people that are working there. That has a big, impact on like in a social setting, but like also really like set Dan and Gravity Payments like was a huge explosion for them in their business and how they became successful. And so, what the main point that I want to get across to you today, and probably one of the top points that I would love to get across to all of you throughout this 12 weeks, is that the actions that you take will have more impact than I think you probably give them credit for. And so, as going back to our Patagonia example, like even at that stage, like Yvonne has no idea who Ryan is, right? But he does this thing. And Ryan has, this like is also extremely successful with a lot of influence and an ability to like have an impact in this world. And just a decision like that, which I don't think he was driven by inspiring others. I think he's driven by just doing the right thing with Patagonia, inspires people across the world. And I think this is what we've seen, is that like even the founders in this room, we have hundreds of founders that want to be at this stage, hundreds that apply to our programs at earlier stages that want to get to a point where they're like qualified for our labs program. And they look at companies like you and they say, I want to do that, right? And so I think how you show up in this space and how you value the impact that you're having and how conscious leadership shows up for you is going to have a huge impact over the next, over your career, not just in this business that you're starting. And then I also just found this funny that Elon didn't tweet about this when it came out, but Grimes did. So it was like close enough, where they're just using 100% of their profits to fight climate change. So my message to you is that you're already having a huge impact. You probably just don't realize it. And one of those impacts that you're having is that right now, I would say in TikTok and other things, there's this narrative of entrepreneurship that I think is really awful, which is get rich quick, or drop shipping, or hustle culture that's really shitty, or all these things. And none of that is helpful for society, or I think for youth that are interested in this world. What you're doing actually is, and what you're so the events that you go to, the things that you participate in, the people that you meet along the way, are going to be inspired by what you're doing, because everybody in this room is, I think, approaching the entrepreneurship in the way that I mentioned, which is solving a problem and being very impact focused, which we all agreed upon at the start of the session when you voted. And so my main message here is that you miss 100% is how you're going to take, but the shots that you've already taken, have already chosen to take, matter. And I want everybody in this room to understand that there are people who are looking at what you're doing and you don't realize it. And I don't think I spent enough time being conscious of this when I was running the companies that I was running. So with that, we're going to take a little mental break here. How are we doing? Does anybody have any questions about anything that I've shared so far? Thumbs up if it's you're on board with what I'm trying to say, right?
I don't have any questions, but I had a question actually. It's a question.
Yeah.
It's more so do you think some companies use sustainability and having an impact just as a marketing play? Probably
100%.
Probably it happens. It's kind of very trendy, very searched for and stuff. So it's kind of hard to differentiate for the consumer what's actually genuine and what's just a marketing play, right?
Yeah, so we call it greenwashing if it's an environmental one, or you see it a lot with Pride, right? Where every freaking company changes their logo, and then it's what are they actually doing about that, right? Or virtue signaling, and that's a really good point. I'll talk more about that later. But yeah, there are tools and things out there to know. I think the companies that do it well, you can find out about it, and the companies that don't do it well, I think eventually get called out on it, and it ends up being a PR nightmare for them, which I've seen a lot as well. But yeah, that's a great point. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Any other questions?
I had a question. Kind of everyone has their own areas that they're passionate about and places where they want to make change, but are also interested holistically in sustainability and equity and all of these huge topics. So I was wondering, as a founder, especially early, I imagine there's a point where you have to make a decision on where you want to put your efforts. Is it in, are you willing to sacrifice for your sustainability goals, and is that affecting your ability to achieve your goals in inclusion, or these kind of trade-offs? And I was wondering if that's something you've come up against.
One, definitely. Yeah, you can't. Here's a perfect example. While we were building Fresh Fruits, so Fresh Fruits was a mobile grocery store that was bringing healthy and affordable food to communities and individuals who had barriers to accessing it. So we worked with affordable housing units, old folks' homes, First Nations communities, things like that. Basically, Walmart on wheels, right? We'd bring healthy, affordable food to them to make it easier, because they normally have barriers to doing that. So our focus there was around food access, with the long-term goal of partnering with other organizations to do food security, right? Which is another level up. But our thesis was, you can't have the conversation about food security if you don't have food access, affordable, healthy food access. And a lot of communities don't have that. So we're going to go out and set that. And then we go out, we do that all the time. And then we would say, and then people would come up to us to be like, is this organic? Is this local? Right? Is this that? Is these other things? And we'd say, no, it's the food that I could get the most value per dollar for, because that's what our goal was in that setting. And we say, so, and at that point, we can't be everything to everybody, right? And so we were clear about what we were trying to do. We had an intention behind it. Right. And we were like, where possible, we were trying to be as sustainable as we could. And we wouldn't unnecessarily cause things. Like obviously we have those values, but when we do the mission, vision, values workshop, like when you have to pick these values and then line it up with action, right? So it's like, don't just be like, oh, we care about, whatever social movement it is, and we're going to change our logo and post about it on social media. And then the other like 51 weeks of the year, you do nothing, right? So it's like at LOI, for example, there's lots of issues that we could have a stance on, but we don't. Like we have a handful that are like actually embedded to what we do, and like how impact shows up. And then the rest of them, it just kind of let people who that's their niche, that's their wheelhouse, and you can kind of like everybody stays in their lane a little bit. And I think when you try to be too many things to too many people is when you run into issues. But yeah, you're right. It comes out. It's an intentional decision that you need to make for how you're going to do that. And if it can be depending on what your product is. For Patagonia, for example, like their biggest thing was the environment, and then they were able to look at their supply chain and do these other things, and then they were able to get back to it and do that kind of stuff. And, there's lots of other things they could be doing, but that's just kind of what they decided was their focus. And so, yeah, that's a great question. And we'll talk more about that in a bit. Does that answer your question?
That does. That's really helpful.
Okay. But yeah, it is goal set. It's basically what are your values as a team, as an organization, and generally at the start, that's your personal goals. And that was one of the other tips, where it's like a lot of founders at this stage neglect how important their personal goals are for the strategic decisions that you're making in your business. So you need to make sure there's a clarity there. That makes sense. So I've spent over a decade, like I said, learning about this stuff. You're not going to learn everything in the next 20 minutes, but I want to give you just a brief overview and some resources to go back with the deck. So we're going to go pretty quickly. I know it's more just to give you an exposure to things so that you can kind of see social entrepreneurship and impact in a different way. And then if you want to have any questions or anything like that, feel free to reach out to me on Slack, send me a message. I can send resources and share them. This is hopefully this relationship between impact and business, that is something that you put effort and energy into learning more and practicing more, like throughout your entire entrepreneurial career. But like I said, this is just going to be kind of like a rough overview of some tools and frameworks. So we're going to get into the nitty gritty. Hold on to your chairs. We're going to go pretty quickly. So, and then we'll stop. Hopefully have some time at the end for some more questions and some chance to maybe a breakout room. So business and impact. Your startup's impact can show up in 3 different areas, as mentioned with the iceberg model. There's you and you as an individual, there's your startup, and then there's your interactions with the community. So questions you can ask yourself are, who am I? How do I lead? What culture do I create? So Spencer, right? Why are these things important? How are you doing these things? What does that look? Also, what kind of leader are you? How much those kind of things. What does your business do? How does your business have an impact? And then how does our business interact with the community and the environment, right? And so those are the 3 different ways that you can look at how your business and your role as an entrepreneur show up. Some points for how to do this, and this taps into greenwashing or virtue signaling, is be authentic, right? Be significant. Don't do it because you care about the problem, not because you think it's going to be good for your brand, right? Be authentic about it. Don't just do it because you want to have that. And that has a meaningful contribution to it. We use the word financially sustainable because for some reason, profit can have negative connotations depending on who you're talking to. But my main message here is be profitable. Don't sacrifice profitability for impact to a point where you're no longer able to grow and scale your business. It's fuel for you to grow and be better. If it doesn't matter how well-intentioned or whatever it is that you are, if you're not profitable, you're not going to get very far. So at the end of the day, your business model, your business metrics are still important. But they're not the only thing, right? You're able to balance them, but make sure that you are profitable. And like I said, stay on top of your finances, because if you are just impact focused, you could feel fulfilled, but that potentially be could be short-lived if you're not like, if you don't have the financial ability to be able to maintain or sustain or even scale your impact. So you want to make sure you actually have that. If you just have a revenue model, you might get wealthy, but ultimately you could feel a lack of motivation or purpose. If you look at any of the research or anything done, it's like founders and other people involved with more impact-driven ventures, have higher life fulfillment and happiness and things like that. Right? Because if you're just purely revenue motivated, it won't get you very far. And then by balancing impact and revenue, your venture can support affiliate. That's the idea. So what is an actual social enterprise? It is not an actual thing. It is a spectrum. So on the right, you have traditional for-profits. On the left, you have philanthropy. And most businesses fall somewhere in between these, right? So depending on how the company is set up, what that looks like, I'll talk more about specifics in a minute. But just so you know, if somebody says like, this is a social enterprise and this isn't, it's like, well, somebody could make an argument that Walmart's a social enterprise because they hire, seniors that have troubles like getting jobs elsewhere to be greeters at their doors. Or in my world where I came from, they made food more available and affordable to communities that need it more than any other company in Canada, right? They are by far the most affordable produce sellers in Canada. So they're having a big impact that way, right? So, I mean, it's all about perspective. There isn't like a fixed definition of what it is. And that's why it's such a complicated area to be in, which is, so the way that I look at it is there's like this, it's called the emerging fourth sector. I think this is one of the easiest ways to like look at it through, which is like, generally you had three sectors before. You had private sector, you had your social sector, and then you had your public sector. And now over the last couple of decades, we've seen a really big boom in this fourth sector, which is enterprising nonprofits, like sustainable enterprises, community development corporations. Like these are all things that are looking at ways of balancing some of the elements of income and purpose, right? This is where it's like trying to find balances in different ways to be able to have it show up differently than how traditionally we set up for-profit companies. And that they're still, for the most part, income generating organizations. Like they are not philanthropy-based organizations. These are income-based organizations where they are earning their own revenue, not asking for donations. And so with that revenue piece of earning your income, it can show up a few different ways. And so one of them is that I'll just skip to the next slide. Donations is one way that companies have traditionally done it, right? CSR or corporate social responsibility. We're seeing more of what's on the right-hand side of this, which is integrated and embedded businesses. So buy one, give ones is an example of integrated, where it's like directly related to your enterprising activities. And then embedded is like your actual service is the impact. And so a great example of that would be like employment models, right? Where like the person that you're employing is the impact and doing that, or the actual service itself is the actual impact and creating that. So that was like, ideally Fresh Roots was that, like the grocery store, right? Like our service was the impact. There's no way we could scale our business without scaling the impact with the model that we have. And so everything just generally falls along this line. At Fresh Roots, for example, like we were an income generating or revenue-based organization. We registered as a nonprofit because we wanted to partner with a lot of public entities, so like universities and cities and stuff like that. And it made partnership with them like a lot easier because they have antiquated bylaws that say, if you're a nonprofit, you can use our space for free. If you're a for-profit, it's going to cost you $400 a week. And even though our model never changed what we were doing, just legally how we were incorporated had an impact on how we wanted to do partnerships. And so that's why we registered as a nonprofit, but we could have easily registered as a for-profit as well. It really just comes down to which one is more strategically advantageous and what your personal goals are. So these I'm going to blow through. You get the link to the deck. You can come back and spend more time looking through these if you want. But you can come and look at what are examples of actual business models and how does impact show up. So these are like employment ones, fee for service cooperatives, market intermediaries. You can go read more about it with examples and what like key success factors could look like. Maybe figure out which one you think you are, maybe see if it's interested. So remember, just this is here in the slide deck. You'll be sent the slide deck. We also have like examples of these like in Canada that you can go and look and see as different things. So we're gonna, well, okay, go back. We are doing good on time. Before we go into closing, does anybody have any questions on anything that we just covered? Have you learned something today? Thumbs up if you've learned at least like one thing today. Something new. All right. So in closing, there are a ton of terms out there. You're not supposed to know them all. Like I said, I've been doing this for 10 years. I still learn stuff about it every day. And really thinking about what you want to focus on specifically and what your social impact purpose is going to be, regardless of which term that you're going to choose in here. You're going to call yourself a social entrepreneur or not, right? Is a choice that you need to come up with and figure out and how it's going to show up. These are decisions that you're going to have to make. I mean, I don't know if you need me to convince you of this. I highly recommend doing this as a part of like just overall success for your business. There's a bajillion studies out there now that shows that people who have like conscious leadership or impact is like an embedded part of what they do, have increased like staff like fulfillment, reduce burnout, increase customer demand, increase innovation, like increase stock performance, like overall like more efficient operational performance, like higher revenue, like their employee productivity, retention, and loyalty is higher. These are all things that come when these things are done well and show up for your business. And so I think this is not only something that would, you know, make, I think, the entrepreneurship journey just like more fulfilling and motivating for you, but I also think it's like a key component to building successful businesses today. Like the more recent the generation, the higher the percentages that they care about this. And I think that's only going to continue in that direction. And so back to our initial like prompt, which is what we started with, which is instead of going public, you could say we're going purpose. What do we actually mean by purpose? And so we define, this is just a different that we like, because define purpose as a company's reason for being that simultaneously helps solve a societal problem and creates significant financial value for the company. That's purpose. And so I would encourage you all to connect purpose and impact and find what your company's purpose is. So what can you do starting today, right? This is a lot of information. That's a huge thing. What can you actually start with? So I'd say you could start with like just some reflection, right? Where it's like, as we talked about earlier this week, it's like habits will eat knowledge all day, every day, right? And so I would start with your habits and then maybe try to like then go focus more on knowledge. But what external like facing work can we focus on, right? Is there a cause that you could align your company with that makes sense, that lends your expertise to that cause? Right? Is there something out there for you in your business to do? You know, and in the actual startup, right? These are the three, if you remember the graphic with the three different things. The startup, like unpack your business in its components, like, right? And is it reasonable? Like, for example, we have a company in our Boost program that's making female like Thai fighting clothing. Its name, and she has all of her products currently manufactured in Canada. In the long term, I don't think that's sustainable. But does that need to be a core element of her impact model? Maybe it doesn't. Do her customers care, right? So this is a good thing. If you go talk to your customers, it would be really good to align your like a target customer, whoever that is, and what do they care about, right? Is that an opportunity for you to like build loyalty and traction with them that makes sense for your business and be able to do that? So that's with your startup. And then for yourself, reflect on who you are as a founder and as a leader. What is your management style going to be as you build and grow your teams? What culture do you want to create? And what will help your team thrive personally and professionally as you build your thriving venture? So We're gonna go. Oh, okay, wait. We're gonna go cover a couple more things first. Other things that you can do is you can just look at what a B Corp is. Like even just like you don't have. I'm not saying go become B Corp certified unless you want to. But if you go and you can actually just like create an account and then like just like go through the questions. It'll give you an idea of all the different ways that different things that you could do internally and externally to look at the impact of your business. So it's just a good way to go like learn more about it. It's free. It's just a good resource. You don't have to pay to become B Corp certified or go through the whole process. Yeah, you can like look at different strategies for it. So again, this is something you can come back and dive into these more if you're interested, right? There's like different ways for like how this shows up between your business and yourself. And then if you want, you could actually incorporate what's called and you can just Google this, impact, like a impact canvas instead of which is like a version of the lean canvas if you wanted to incorporate it into that way as well. So kind of looks like this, like what is your model? What is the value proposition? Very similar. As just another tool that you can use if you're interested in like kind of fleshing this out a little bit. And like I said, doing the work. And then there's also another great resources, which is regeneration, looking at ways that it shows up for your career and your company. Really well done website. So with that, we're going to go to a breakout room for, we're going to go back to, so we're going to give you a minute to look at this slide. Okay. Jot a couple things down of things that you are either currently doing or could look at doing in your business for balancing these things. So just going to give you a minute to do it. I'm not going to, yes, you got to write a couple things down because you're not going to have this slide. And then we're going to go to breakout rooms for 4 or 5 minutes and then come back and wrap up. So just take a minute, jot down a couple things. And then whoever has the longest hair is going to go first, and then next shortest, and then next shortest. And we'll make the rooms relatively small so that everybody gets a chance to share. Okay. And I might move them around a little bit. So see everybody back here in 5 minutes.
I might stay here just because I'm having a hard time focusing to like have a discussion.
Mm-hmm.
There's like music in the background. I don't know if you can hear it.